are rocking the Hot Rod 49cc Lean Mean Scooting Machine. And in this episode, we're going to touch on Tucker the Adventure Dog. We're going to talk about master carpenters, squeeze in a little RV tour, and teach you about a really confusing thing that Jesus says about poor people being happy. Be sure to stick around for the end. We'll share some outtakes. And the way this is going so far, I'm sure there's going to be some outtakes. So, let's go. Hey there, welcome to the Journey Church. We're an online church for people everywhere. And everything we do is designed to help you get to know Jesus, understand your Bible, and inspire you to walk out the things that you're learning in your everyday life. By the way, it's pretty cool. That's called being a disciple. Well, in the last episode, I introduced this new series that we're in called the Happiness Reset. We're taking a fresh look at the Beatitudes. Wait, the Beato, what? The truth is, beatitude is a weird word. It's definitely not something that comes up in our everyday conversation. This is actually a word that we find in many of our Bibles, and it's added in as a section heading or a subtitle, and it's not even part of the original letter that Matthew wrote. It was added later, essentially to sort of provide a summary of the section below. And the word beatitude actually means a deep sense of happiness. It's a kind of happiness that is not connected to your circumstances. So for example, you scratch a lottery ticket and you win $100. I mean, yahoo, right? You're happy, but that's a happiness that's a result of your circumstances. Beatitude is a word that's trying to give you an idea of a deeper, fuller kind of happiness. I've got a story for you to help you maybe understand the beatitude type of happiness and what it might look like. I'll tell you up front, it's not my best story ever. Check this one out. Well, maybe you're a pet person, maybe not. But my wife and I have this great little dog named Tucker. If you've been watching our episodes, you've probably seen him around. He's a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Big name, small dog. And he is a great little companion. He wasn't our top choice of a pet. That's another story for another day, but he is certainly a part of our family now. He brings us tons of laughs and joy, and he's also a great people magnet, which is kind of fun for doing ministry and meeting new people as we get out and travel. And it's not hard to see why. People just love Tucker. But what if one day Tucker got hit by a car? I know. Terrible, terrible example, right? But hang in there with me for a second. Hypothetically, he's hit and we lose our precious little pup. Yes, we would absolutely be devastated. There would most certainly be tears. But in the midst of all of that, there would also still be this sense of happiness intertwined, a deep down inside happiness at the memories of all the time together and the joy that he brought to us and to so many others. It's a kind of happiness that's there in your soul, and it's not dependent on your circumstances. End of that terrible example. Sometimes I think of cool ideas in my head, and then when I say them out loud, they're not nearly as good. That might be one of them. The truth is, the things that Jesus says here at the very beginning of Matthew chapter 5 really are kind of cryptic, and a lot of people do get genuinely confused by them. That's why I really wanted to get creative and do my best to give you some concrete ways to understand what Jesus is saying and help you not only learn what he's saying, but actually understand these really unique declarations from Jesus that we call the Beatitudes. And one of the ways we're going to do this is introduce you to a new gauge each week, something that's real, that will help you remember to think of the Beatitudes as a new set of gauges to help you determine if your life is running the way that Jesus says will be blessed. Well, this week we wanted to invite you inside the RV, give you a quick tour, and highlight a gauge that we had to actually add, and it's a gauge that's really helpful for us. Then we're going to jump into the first Beatitude. It's one of those ones that I think probably 90% of the people misunderstand or just completely skip altogether. All right, about right here, I was going to be like, hey, let's go check out, like our RV has a name. Let's check out Big Bertha. I don't know. And then I was thinking in my own head before I said it, like, do RVs have names? I know boats have names, but I don't know if RVs have names. Drop us a comment. Let us know. Do RVs have names? And if they do, what do you guys think we should call this big beast? All right, let's check it out. So in here in this catch-all closet, we've got this little instrument panel. And that thing is essentially the control center for the RV. We can set the thermostat, we can turn on the air conditioning, pull out the slides, awnings, all of the stuff really that you would ever want to do with this RV, you can control from there. Even all the lights you can turn on and off from there. But there's one thing that that little magic panel does not do, which is really important when you live in an RV, is knowing how much propane you have left. Because our fridge runs on propane when we're not hooked up to electric. We cook with propane, we heat with propane. I'm starting to sound like King of the Hill, propane and propane accessories. But the problem with this little gadget is it doesn't tell you how much propane you actually have. So we went out and found an amazing little set of gauges to help us solve that problem. And I want to show you how they work. So in the RV, on both sides, there's a big propane tank up in the front, and without any sort of gauge, there's no way to know how much propane you have in here, except by sort of tapping, which I've learned from experience, it doesn't work very well. You can pick it up, but it's a big pain to unstrap everything and then lift the propane tank to see how heavy it is. So we found these handy dandy little gauges. This little device right here goes on the bottom of the propane tank, and it connects with a couple of magnets. And then this little thing is just powered by some watch batteries, and it is just a sending unit. It sends a signal somehow through some sort of magic science up through the propane tank and back, and determines how much propane is left in here. And what's amazing is it works if it's a tank like this. If we put in our auxiliary smaller tank, it still works. And I'll show you in the closet where the receiver is and exactly how this thing works. So let me put it back on and we'll go find out if we got any propane left in here. All right, so then come inside in the closet. We've got this little device mounted up here, and you just hit those buttons and wait to see what happens. According to that, it's time to go get propane. Good thing we checked. Well, let's take a look at the gauge that Jesus maps out in the first Beatitude. We can find it in Matthew chapter 5, and it just shows up in one verse. It's verse 3, and it says this: Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's like Jesus is saying, when this sending unit says one thing, then it means this thing, right? It's kind of like sticking this little sending unit here up to my heart, and it's reading my heart and soul, and then it sends this signal out. Jesus is saying that there are people that God looks at and he sees in them, like their sending unit is sending out poor in spirit. And he says that those people are blessed because the kingdom of heaven belongs to people like that. Well, let's be honest. That's not an easy little statement to understand. So let's take a second and unpack it. Because some people read this verse and what they hear is something like this: blessed are the poor in spirit. That's not an easy thing to understand. So they look up what blessed actually means, and then they find in a concordance or in the back of their Bible or looking it up on the internet that blessed means essentially happy. So then they read it again. Happy are the poor in spirit. And this is about where people start to kind of scratch their head, right? You may have done something similar. Maybe you found yourself thinking that this was super confusing, or maybe it even made you mad. Like you found yourself thinking and processing, like, Jesus really wants me to go around feeling all happy and smiley when I'm poor and hopeless and at the end of my rope? I mean, no thanks, Jesus, right? Like maybe you even thought this was some sort of cruddy bait and switch that Jesus is trying to pull here. But hang in, hold tight. If you've been confused about this statement by Jesus, or even mad, I just want to say, first of all, good job that you're actually reading the word and trying to make sense of it. But I also want to say that kind of reaction, that if you had that reaction, if you're confused or angry or bothered by it, I can assure you it's a matter of a misunderstanding. Because your feelings are stemming from something that Jesus isn't actually saying here. So let's lean into this and look at what is Jesus actually saying here. First of all, I want you to know that there's some really cool things to dig into. So I want to make sure you look in the description below for the link to the study guide that goes along with this episode. In fact, we've got a study guide that goes along with every episode we produce to help you dig in and go deeper and get more out of the lesson. But for now, I want to help you get a better picture of what Jesus was saying in a way that makes sense in the world that we live in right now. One of my first jobs when I was in high school was working for a contractor, like a carpenter kind of contractor. And the two guys that owned the company had been building custom homes for years. It didn't take me too long to realize that these guys were really gifted. And the longer I worked for them, the more I came to believe that there wasn't anything that they couldn't build with wood. Well, later I learned that both of them were master carpenters. And over the time I worked for them, they hired and fired a lot of different guys. And I started to notice that lots of the guys that didn't seem to work out were the ones, ironically, that showed up talking about how much experience they had, bragging about all the things that they had done and the things that they knew how to do. And when we were out on the job site, they didn't ask the bosses for help. They didn't really listen to the way that the bosses wanted things done. And more often than not, they seemed to kind of mess things up. And then the boss would have to come back and fix it. That was usually about the time that I'd see them off on the side having a talk. Probably went something like, hey, thanks for giving it a try with us, but no need to come back tomorrow, right? And they would let those guys go. But what was funny is somehow I managed to keep working for these guys. I had no experience, no tools, and I barely knew what to do from hour to hour on any given job, especially in the beginning. But what I did have is something way more valuable than so many of the guys that they hired. I had a right view of who I was and what I brought to the table and who they were, my bosses, and what they had to offer. Well, I liked doing construction and I really admired these guys. And the more that I worked for them, the more that I looked up to them. I didn't have any problem seeing myself as inexperienced because I was. And it actually drove me to want to learn more and more from these guys that I was working for. And so I tried to work close by and pay attention to what they did and how they did it, trying to pick up on the things that they'd learned over a lifetime. From time to time, I would get a little puffed up, maybe more often than time to time, And I think I knew probably more than I did, and they'd turned me loose on some part of the project, and it didn't take very long to see that I still had a lot to learn. In the beginning, I thought they were really good carpenters. But then after a few years of working for them on and off, I had a much different thought. I found myself thinking something more like this, like if I could become half the carpenter that they were someday, that would be pretty amazing. And it wasn't about putting myself down and having some sort of fake sense of humility, right? Those were thoughts that came from a deep respect and honor for these men and the lifetime of wisdom and experience that they had that I only hoped that I could have one day. Well, this is a picture of poor in spirit, seeing who we are in light of who God is. It's not about, oh, woe is me, and I'm such a wretch, and look at what a mess I am. That's not it at all. It's about really learning to see yourself in light of who God is, to become aware that you have a lot to learn, that the longer you know God, the more you realize that He's worthy of our devotion and honor. The more you want to learn to think the way He thinks and to act the way He acts and to love the way that He loves. Not because you're some terrible person, but because you see how far off you are from a perfect and holy God. So Jesus is making this great declaration, like a public announcement. Listen up, He says. Here's something that you need to know. These people that have a handle on who they are, they have a deep sense of honor and reverence for God. These same people that have no problem humbly admitting how far off they are from God's perfect ways. These people, these are the ones that have a sense of happiness that goes beyond the trials of their daily lives and their circumstances because they possess something incredibly valuable. They know who they are and they know who God is. These are like the humble workers that keep their eyes and ears tuned in to learn from the master carpenter. They watch on as others that come along that seem like they know a lot more than them. They have the nicer truck, the better tools. They seem to know all the lingo. They may be a little bit overconfident, even arrogant or prideful. And these humble ones watch as those that seem like they should be the right fit for things. They don't stick around. You see, there's something really important about seeing who you are and understanding what you bring to the table in light of what God brings to the table. Staying humble and hungry and eager to learn from God. So yeah, these people are happy. They're blessed. That's why Jesus can say, blessed are the people who are poor in spirit, because they have a place in God's business now and forever. They're kingdom citizens. They know who they are and they know who God is. And absolutely, that's a reason to be happy. So this week, be sure to check your gauge, right? Is it reading poor in spirit or something else? And if you really want to know what your gauge is reading, try asking the people in your family, maybe your coworkers. If you want to get brave, ask your boss. Here's what you would ask them. You'd ask them something like this. Do you come across as more humble and eager to listen and learn? Or are you coming off more as proud and tend to act like you kind of know how to do most things on your own? Personally, this one hits pretty close to home for me. Way too often, when I check my gauge, it's reading the opposite of poor in spirit, to be completely candid with you. Thankfully for the Holy Spirit, for my wife and friends in my life to help point me back to the gauge and do a check with the words of Jesus. Hey, be sure to look in the description below and find the link to the study guides so that you can dig into this episode a little bit more. There's also a study guide that goes along with every episode we do. We would also love to help you get connected in a small group. We've got groups meeting in person in different places in the United States and Canada. And we've got virtual groups starting up online via Zoom and some other methods. So if you're looking to get connected, you want to build some community and get in with some other folks that want to grow in their relationship with the Lord, let us help you. Reach out in the link in the description below, or just shoot us an email at info@jointhejourneychurch.com. We would love to help you get connected and growing in your relationship with God. So we're going to jump out and enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. And we'll see you next week from somewhere out there. And I think a lot of people get confusing. They get confusing. Have you ever gotten confusing? One time I was so disoriented, I got confusing. And a deep sense of honor and reverence for the cars that keep driving by. I thought hammocks were supposed to be comfortable. I feel like I'm being attacked by a giant flour tortilla. Oh, tortilla. Oh, tortilla. Oh, tortilla. Wrap me up. To give you some really concrete ways. The truth is... And we're out.